Here in the Bodie Hills, I wanted to acknowledge the Bridgeport Indian Colony and the other sovereign nations of the area, the people who have been living here for thousands of years and still do. Good morning. We're here in the beautiful Bodie Hills. I'm Jora Fogg, Policy Director at Friends of the Inyo. I'm joined by Nora Livingston, Naturalist at the Mono Lake Committee and organizer of the Mono Basin Bird Chautauqua. We'll show you some of the sights of our tour of Bodie Hills Birds and Blossoms.
So we're here in the Pinyon Juniper Forest right at the base of Masonic Road, our first stop for this Chautauqua trip. And we're hearing common nighthawks and chipping sparrows and gray flycatchers. And we're also in the presence of some pretty amazing trees that have a lot of importance for the birds that live here and the plants that come here, or the plants that grow here. This is a pinyon pine, the only single-needled pine in the Eastern Sierra. And as you can see, this particular pine is laden with cones from last fall. Now, a lot of birds eat the pinyon nuts, including Clark's nutcrackers and pinyon jays specifically. And pinyon jays are a bird who have evolved to be able to fly long distances to find the best harvest of pinyon nuts. And so these trees, they don't mast, they don't have a lot of pine cones every year, but about every 4 to 7 years, they'll have a big burst of pine cones. And so the pinyon jays have to fly around to find the best area with the most cones, because there can be years that there aren't that many cones on these trees. And they'll pry open the cones or they'll forage them off the ground. But when you see a tree that is this filled with cones, you know that it was a good year for the pinyon jays in this pinyon forest. Oh, and I hear a pinyon jay right now, actually. So they have a very comical call. They go, wah! Wah, rah, rah. As they fly by, you'll usually see a big flock of them.
We're here at our second stop on the tour. We're at the Chemung Pond, as it's locally known. It's one of the many dry lakes in the Bodie Hills. This is one of the smaller ones, and as you can see, it's very dry right now. We did have a dry winter here in the Eastern Sierra. In big water years, with a lot of runoff, this lake would have water in it. There would be a little bit of standing water left. In past years, we've had American avocets and white-faced ibis and other water birds. But today we have upland birds singing. We have green-tailed towhees, brewer sparrows, a sage thrasher serenading us. And behind me in the distance is the Sweetwater Range, which borders the Bodie Hills to the west and north. The highest point in the Sweetwaters is over 11,000 feet. We're here across the road at the Chemung mine site, one of several auxiliary mines outside of Bodie State Historical Park. This mine operation behind me was a stamp mill and produced gold and silver in the late 1800s and early 1900s. We also have Aspen next door, where warbling vireos are singing. The mine sites are often a great place to explore, but you want to stay outside of the structures because many of them are dangerous and in disrepair. So we do recommend that when you visit these mine sites, you walk around the outside and view them from a distance. Behind the Chemung mine is Masonic Mountain. Masonic Mountain is one of the higher peaks in the Bodie Hills. What's really interesting about Masonic Mountain is it's one of the only locations in the Bodie Hills where the American pika lives. So you think of the pika as residing in the high Sierras, but further east we've found that there's a small population of pika that are living here on Masonic Mountain and also on the mountain within Bodie State Historical Park. These pika were discovered not that long ago by a researcher who lives in the Mono Basin. You can scramble up to the top of Masonic Mountain. It's a great day adventure and the views are amazing. Maybe you'll even get to see a pika.
We're here at our third stop at Lakeview Spring in this beautiful aspen habitat. You can hear a house wren singing behind me. There have been fox sparrows and white-breasted nuthatches. But here I have an aspen tree with a special design on it. These are sapsucker wells. So this is a type of woodpecker that actually drills these holes in aspen trees, and they don't drill them too deep, just deep enough to help sap seep out and attract ants. So the sapsuckers, red-breasted sapsuckers, will sit on the tree and wait for ants to be attracted to the sap, and then they'll pick off the bugs. So we call them sapsuckers, although mostly they use it as an ant trap. We see a lot of red-breasted sapsucker nests in aspen groves like this one. This is a perfect example of a hole that a red-breasted sapsucker nests in. So woodpeckers actually carve out holes that then go deep into the aspen center, and they can raise their family there. And then years later, other birds like mountain chickadees, mountain bluebirds, and nuthatches can use this hole for their nests as well. So they're kind of ecosystem engineers. They build other birds' homes. This is a Sierra onion, Allium campantulatum, and this fills aspen forest floors in the shade. And you can see there's actually a little onion bulb at the base, and it is edible and has been a staple food of the local indigenous people for thousands of years. And they taste exactly like your kitchen onion and have these beautiful pink flowers. This one is a little old and shriveled, which is why I dug it up. There are some really fresh ones in this grove, and they're still growing their onions.
Here we are at another aspen in this grove at Lakeview Spring. This aspen is really interesting because it has black bear marks on it. So the bears climb these aspen trees and deliberately move their claws into the trunk of the aspen to create these scars. You can see them up there at the top and down here. Sometimes you can even see an entire bear paw outline with the claw marks. So the reasons the bears do this are to mark their territory in a certain area. So they really like the aspen groves because they eat those aspen onions that we learned about earlier. They dig for grubs and insects under the soil. And they also climb trees to escape danger. So next time you're in an aspen grove, look for these bear claw marks, and you'll know a bear was there. We're stopping here to show off the Brown's peonies. This is a perennial plant that is actually very rare in the Bodie Hills. This is also the most eastern part of this species range. So this peony is found throughout California, but generally much further west than the Bodie Hills. And it really likes shade and canopy. So we have a few other specimens over here in this aspen grove, but this one is out in the sun and it seems to be doing fairly well. The peonies have these very bizarre prehistoric looking flowers This is at the end of its flower cycle, so just the seed pod is left. And these will dry up, and this plant will die back in the winter and reemerge as a tiny plant very early in the spring. This is about as big as this plant will get this summer. We've missed the peak of the bloom, but it's a very special plant to the Bodie Hills because of only a few specimens occurring here. This is a desert paintbrush, commonly also known as Great Basin paintbrush. There's a few different species in the Bodie Hills. This one is characteristically red. Other species come in shades of yellow and orange, buff and whites. We also have a lupin here. It's a little dried out and past its prime, but it's growing right next to this paintbrush. And paintbrushes will often grow right next to other plants because they are shaded from those plants, and they also get nutrients. They're almost like a parasitic relationship with the plant, with the host plant that they live next to. We're kind of in a north-facing aspect here, which I think has allowed these flowers to hold on a little bit longer, even though we're past the bloom. This yellow flower here, which is just starting to open, has little touches of orange in it, is called sulfur buckwheat. It's from the Eriogum family of buckwheats, of which it's one of the largest families of flowering plants that we have here in the Bodie Hills. There's also a couple of rayless daisies hiding. Here's one hiding under this sulfur buckwheat. So it's a daisy, but it doesn't have those ray flowers like you see a lot of daisies have. So we have really healthy looking sage in here. We have the sulfur buckwheat. We also have what's commonly known as snowberry. Later in the summer, we'll see a nice white flower and then a white berry on the snowberry, which is how it gets its name. So we're here at our last stop, almost to the junction of the Masonic Road, the Geiger Grade, and the Aurora Road. And we're up at the top of a hill right here in sagebrush habitat. And this is where the bi-state sage grouse lives. There's also a lot of cattle grazing here, and we have these barbed wire fences that are 4-rung barbed wire. These are tags that the sage grouse can see from far away when they're flying. So before we started marking these fences, the sage grouse would fly in and get caught in the barbed wire and die. So someone had the idea of putting these markers on, and they alternate white and dark all up and down the top rung of the fence. So the sage grouse will see these from far away and be able to fly over the fence, which is why they are put on the top rung of the fence. Us folks in the conservation community and with the BLM and Forest Service like to also convert fences to have this bottom rung be non-pokey barbed wire. So it wouldn't be barbed wire, it would just be a solid strip of metal on the bottom, and that would allow other animals like pronghorn and mule deer and small mammals to get under the fence to pass through. That's the end of the tour. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. To learn more, visit bodiehills.org.